Today, we're going to talk about interview etiquette, how you can prepare for and succeed in many different types of interviews. So, at various times throughout your career, you may meet an individual that works for a firm that you're interested in working for. So, if you decide to apply for a position that's open and you're accepted for an interview, you may have one of many different types of interviews. You may have an in person interview, you may have a virtual interview, and you also may have an interview that occurs over a meal, such as lunch or dinner. Today, we're going to talk about 4 steps that you can take to best research, practice, prepare, and follow up in the event of an interview. So, step 1 is to do your research. You want to think to yourself, why is it that you want to work here? And what do you know about this company? A very common question that companies like to ask is, what do you know about our firm? They want to see that you've put in the time and done the research so that you're prepared in the interview. The good news is you have lots of resources available to you to conduct research before an interview. You always want to review the company's website so that you can understand as much as possible about the business. You also want to review the company's social media presence. Sometimes they'll post current events and different items that may be helpful, or they may help you develop questions to ask in the interview. If possible, you also want to conduct some research on the people that you will be meeting with during your interview, such as looking at their LinkedIn profile, finding out what area of the business they specialize in, and maybe preparing some questions in advance. Step 2, you want to practice. So you want to practice interview questions prior to going into an interview. I guarantee you very few people do not practice ahead of time and go in and have a fantastic interview. The key to feeling less nervous on the day of the interview and providing high quality responses to interview questions has everything to do with how much time you spend practicing. So use online research resources. Look on Google for interview questions. Look at the Career Center. Lots of great resources are available to you just to practice answering interview questions. A couple of tips as you are answering questions. You want to maintain positivity in your responses. You want to avoid simply saying no if they ask you a question. Keep in mind that this is an opportunity for you to professionally show your personality to the person that's interviewing you. And be prepared to tell some stories about your experiences and different items that you have listed on your resume. Step 3 is to prepare. So when you're preparing for an interview, you have a lot of things that you need to prepare for. The first is figuring out, what are you going to wear to your interview? If you're unsure of what to wear, keep in mind that it's always a best practice to overdress. You'll never be sorry if you overdress, but you might be sorry if you underdress. So, business professional attire is the most appropriate for an interview setting. Keep in mind that if you wear a full suit, and for some reason you arrive and find that you should be dressed a little bit more casually, all you have to do is simply take off your jacket and all of a sudden you're dressed business casual. In addition to your dress, you want to take into consideration, particularly if you'll be having a virtual interview, what is your environment going to look like during the interview time? You want to identify a quiet space where you can complete the interview. You want to make sure that you look professional on your computer screen or whatever technology you're using for your interview. So that includes the lighting in your room, that includes the background that the professional will see when you're conducting the interview. And you also want to have some backup technology available. So if you're using your laptop for your actual interview, make sure that you have your cell phone or a tablet or some other backup device that you can use if something goes wrong with your technology. You want to make sure that the way that you appear to the interviewer on the other side of the screen properly reflects the professionalism that you want to exude. So it's always a good idea to just double check things like the lighting in your room, the camera angle, and the background in the area where you'll be conducting your interview. You also want to review the job description for the position that you're applying for. So when you do that, keep an eye out for key words in that description that show what the interviewer is looking for in this position. It's ideal if you're able to discuss specific skills that you have that will help fit those needs and to incorporate those key words. A great way to do this is to tell stories about your experience. So if you think about looking at your resume, for example, prepare some stories where you can talk about maybe a time where you worked together in a team or where you led an effort at your work or at your job. And if you can kind of speak to and create stories from the content of your resume, that will help you be better prepared about what to say during the interview. You also must prepare questions in advance that you are going to ask the interviewer. So keep in mind, interviews are a two-way street. They're talking to you to see if you will be a good fit for their organization, but you also want to ask questions to make sure that they're going to be a good fit for you. Here are some tips for developing and preparing questions prior to an interview. You always want to prepare at least 5 questions in advance to take with you and have ready the day of the interview. I realize that 5 sounds like a lot of questions, but the truth is the interviewer is likely going to answer 2 or 3 of those questions throughout your interview. So it's very important that you still have a couple questions left at the end to ask. Second, you want to make sure that you have thoughtful and well-researched questions. So put some time and effort and thought into the questions that you prepare. Third, a good option is to ask open-ended questions. So these are questions where there's not a yes or no answer or a correct or an incorrect answer. So you may ask the person that's interviewing you, what do they like about working at the firm? You can see that there's no right or wrong answer to that. This can help kind of increase the flow of conversation and allow the interviewer to share some of their opinions with you. If you take the time to properly prepare for your interview, you'll feel so much better on the day of the interview. If you already know what you're going to say, what you're going to wear, and the questions that you're going to ask, you'll be set up for success the day of the event. Step 4, follow-up. So this is what you do after the interview. Regardless of the type of interview you have, you always want to follow up and send a thank you. So you should send a thank you email to every single person that you interview with, and those emails should be sent within 24 hours. The sooner the better, because sometimes companies make hiring decisions very quickly. And if there are 2 candidates that are essentially ideal in terms of their skills and qualifications, and one of them sends a thank you email and the other one does not, that can absolutely make the difference in who receives the job offer. So always send thank yous and always send them very quickly as soon as possible after your interview concludes. You always want to make sure that you mention something specific that you discussed with that person, and this is also a great opportunity for you to reiterate your interest in the position. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today and to interview me. I really enjoyed learning more about your firm, and I'm very happy to be considered for this position. After you follow these steps, now it's time to celebrate. Sit back, relax, and wait until you hear back from the company about who they decide to choose for the position. Good luck.